like a few minutes ago, we're like.
Okay.
I haven't had a chance to.
Yeah.
Do so.
Ms. Franklin, we're like.
Okay, good. Welcome, everybody. Let's call to order the David Douglas School District Board Workshop on Monday, November 17th at 6:05 p.m. Oh, please do.
So we're going to start with a land acknowledgement. Today we want to begin our meeting and our school year by acknowledging that we gather as David Douglas School District on the traditional land of the Paloma, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Malala, and many other tribes, past and present, who made their homes along the Columbia and Willamette rivers, and honoring with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. We further want to again acknowledge the impact of the forced removal, violence, and attempted erasure of the lives and legacies of Indigenous people, past and present, and to commit to creating an educational environment that honors Indigenous history and contributions, and encourages the continual pursuit of better stewardship of the land we inhabit as well.
Right. So Kim, this is to you.
Yes, I'll take it, and ultimately I'm handing it off to Pat. First and foremost, I want to thank our board team, and we have some special guests in the room as well, just for making time and space. It's a Monday night. Usually our workshop's on Thursday night. We didn't have a workshop scheduled in November, and holidays, a lot of different reasons, but we wanted to get out in front as much as we can around budget and where we're at. If you remember, we did this type of workshop early December. We could have waited till early December, but we talked to board leadership and we can fit it in November. So anyway, thank you for your flexibility and willingness to do that. Today, as you see the packet there, again, I'm going to hand it off, but state of the district, really it's landscape, it's projections. We're early when it comes to numbers. We don't know exacts. These are based on projections, based on information, data, but unfortunately we do know there's reductions. We know we're going to be facing reductions, and we want to start those conversations. There won't be answers today. There won't be solutions today. There won't be, this is what we're reducing today. None of those conversations, we haven't even started yet, right? But we want to get in front of and start the conversation of what we think we know and what steps we're going to have to take. As well as the district landscape, we're going to talk a little bit, Pat's going to talk a little bit about the ODE budget notifications. I've tried to keep the board updated a little bit. Again, right now, the big date is Wednesday, the 19th is when the next revenue forecast comes out. And everything we've heard is if that's down, then some of these reductions that we'll see tonight, and how much time we'll spend on them, could become realities. If the revenue forecast is more neutral, looks better than they thought, then maybe it was just an exercise from ODE and CASE, right? Going through, if we had to cut, what would we cut? Because that's how they're describing it right now. So that's what we're thinking. And then obviously at the end, opening for questions, kind of navigating, or any other data or information the board wants us to get to you that we didn't get to tonight. We will definitely do that and make sure we get it in front of the board. I don't know if we'll take the full 2 hours. We do have two hours scheduled, 6 to 8. And we will definitely watch the clock. We might be done a little earlier, or we might go right up to that time. So if there's no questions to start, I'm going to turn it over to Pat. She's got a slide deck that we're going to walk through.
Pat?
I think we're ready, Pat.
Yep. So on the agenda tonight, as Ken said, we'll do a brief overview of the ODE budget notification and scenarios. I won't go through everything. I did print out the PowerPoint that they shared with us. There's also a link that you can go in and look at later, and that I believe is a spreadsheet format. Then we'll go a little bit into the district. We'll look at the general fund and grant funds, and then we'll open up for questions. So as we know, the September economic forecast showed a deficit. So all state agencies were notified that they needed to prepare reduction proposals. They were to prepare them in 2.5% and 5% increments for all fund types. ODE was instructed to do the state school fund in 0.5% increments. So their proposals were based on 4 general areas: their general fund, their other funds, the corporate activity tax, and the state school fund. So this gives you some idea of what we're looking at as far as percentages and dollars. So ODE's general fund, about 18.8 million at 2.5, 37.6 million at 5% level. Corporate activity tax, 57.3, 5%, 114 million. State school funds, a 0.5% reduction, about 57 million, 5%, nearly 570 million. So those are some big ranges. And we'll go to the next slide. It's really small. This is programs that are proposed as full reductions in year 2. So what we were informed is ODE was actually going to do full programmatic cuts starting this year. And we kind of went, whoa, we're already in the year, almost halfway through, and some have spent funds. So how do we navigate that? So they kind of redirected their course, but you can see here, there's a lot on that. There are several things that are from the carve-outs. So if you're familiar with the state school fund total, there's about 60 million in carve-outs that they take right off the top, and then they start calculating how much will go out to districts and ESDs. So they have eliminated or proposed to eliminate some of those carve-outs. What's unclear is several of those are in statute, so if we're not sure, like the Menstrual Dignity Act, will we just absorb those costs and not receive funding? Or will they actually do something in the legislative session to say, hey, we're gonna hold folks harmless, this is gonna be, waived or whatnot, so, or repealed. Again, there's a link to a comprehensive list found on the ODE website. And they reiterated many times that this was standard operating procedure for them. But I think in Ken and my experience, the last time we've had them coming to us in this way with a reduction was right as the pandemic came out. And so while they may do this every year, they normally don't share out this level of detail. Because of the economic forecast, we can anticipate there definitely will be some reductions needed. The legislature will look at these when they go into session. So we'll see more to come. Any questions there? So I'm going to slide into the general fund. We're going to look at some of the revenue components and concerns. So taxes, enrollment, reductions from the state, and spend down on ending fund balance. So this chart here gives you an idea of our assessed value. So this is how we get our taxes. We have a permanent tax rate. We assess that goes in the general fund. This is separate. This is our operating levy. This is separate from our general obligation bond, so that is totally different. But what I really wanted to bring to your attention is that yearly, from year to year, you're seeing a fairly small amount of increase in taxes overall compared to our budget. So you can see starting in 16-17, 378,000, that was the increase from the prior year. You'll see a large increase last year. And so the reason that is the Lentz URA came back into our tax base. And so that bumped up our tax base quite a bit for that year. So we got the associated taxes. If you actually look at our annual financial report, you will realize that we got some additional funds. And that was because Prosper Portland had paid off their bonds, and anything that they collected based on our tax base, they had to return to us. So we got, I think, 900,000 for our general fund last year. So that's an anomaly, just like this coming back on. It's a one-time deal. We don't anticipate Gateway to come back for about 8 more years, I believe it is. So there's a long time before we get any real significant increase in our tax base. That's gonna increase the taxes in our budget enough to really make a huge difference, if that makes sense. These numbers here on the tax assessment, I just wanna make sure folks realize. So we actually adjust those numbers when we budget because there are often delinquencies, folks who don't pay their taxes, and there's people who pay their taxes in advance and get a discount. And so we have to adjust for that, but I wanted to give you an idea what that amount would be. So general fund enrollment, I just wanted to give you an idea of where we're trending. So we were really excited at the end of last year because we were trending up. We are back to trending down. We've shared that before, but I kind of wanted to put this in numbers for you. That 8421, I believe was November 7th enrollment number. Preliminary ADMW number 11146. That's quite a bit down from 11401, which was our number at the end of last year. So it's about 254. Our poverty ADMW is down just a little bit, but just a reminder, that'll get adjusted here when the federal data gets released in December. So there's still a lot of things in play that could change things significantly. You can get an idea there of what that difference is of 254, that's nearly $3 million, 2.8 million, that we won't receive because of the ADM reduction. Any questions there?
Sure. How does the tax assessment on the previous slide and the enrollment play together?
So these are components. So what I'm kind of teeing up is taxes is a component, it's a local revenue. So I wanted to give you an idea of what generally do we get in taxes as an increase year to year, just so you get an idea that we're not gonna we can't change our permanent tax rate. There's really not a huge amount there when we think about giving pay increases or adding programs. So just to kind of give people a base on what the taxes are. The enrollment is going to get into the state school fund.
Okay.
And that's where it's going to play because these numbers go into how our state school fund grant is calculated. That's the biggest portion of our general fund.
And so the previous slide is independent of the
Correct.
They don't really play off each other.
Right.
It's just, you're gonna, whatever the tax rate for the district is gonna show up.
Right.
No matter if 5 kids show up or 5,000 kids.
And so what I wanted to make sure though is we had that little bump last year, so I didn't want people to think, well, your numbers are off because, hey, you got this big increase last year. That was an anomaly and kind of a lucky thing for us that it rolled back on. There's a little extra in that fund balance, so.
At ADM,
Average daily membership,
sorry.
that's okay.
And the W.
And W is weighted.
These are cool acronyms you learn in OSBA.
Yeah. All sorts of acronyms.
Yeah.
Be sure to stop me if I say something and you're not sure what I'm saying. I try to remember, but I'm old and, things tend to roll off.
This is your normal language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just-
So let's look at that state school fund. It's unclear at this time whether there will or will not be reductions. They've proposed many reductions, including to the state school fund and the carve-outs. So 56 million, we're assuming that because it'll be so late that they won't assess that on the current year. Now, that's an assumption, depending on what's going on at the state level. They could just say your May payment's gonna be less. So we'll need to wait and see. Sense is though that it probably would double up basically because 56 million reduction to the state school fund is over the total biennium for them. if they're making that decision that late and they push it to next year, that's kind of doubling the cut for us. So 900,000, whereas 570 million would be about 9 million for the upcoming year. What isn't quite clear is whether the carve-outs and that percentage reduction in their proposal is doubled. So we're hoping that they noted that if you take this, you can't take a full 0.5% because you've already carved some out of the carve-outs. That makes sense.
We're worried we're gonna get docked twice.
So. General fund,
To be, sorry, Pat, just
No,
a
go ahead.
part of this, want you to know, anything we're bringing up to you as questions, we have fielded to ODE for clarification, not necessarily us, but in the groups we're in with that team as they're communicating things. And some of these we just haven't got answers on yet.
Yeah.
They just aren't sure, but we aren't just standing back with these questions, we're putting them forward.
One, thank you. And two, is there precedent to that?
It's
Do
been,
we know of or within the last 20 years? Like
I don't
a
think,
great recession?
I don't recall them proposing eliminating carve-outs because they were statutory. So my recollection is they looked at the total state school fund and said, we're reducing it by this much, and they still had their carve-outs.
I cannot think of anything other than you brought it up. The recession was a very significant cut. We have had payments, so there's precedent for payments that have been reduced, the spring payment, some of the things. But I don't recall, we totally trust Pat, if she's saying she doesn't remember, then probably this might be a new process, but we can check into that. Yeah.
There is.
Yeah.
And then, just to give a sense of ending funds balance over time, so 2019, 20, some of us don't want to remember. But 15.3 million, it crept up as the pandemic occurred. And when we came back, we had difficulty hiring, finding subs, things just kind of rolled in. And you can see now how quickly we anticipate to spend down. So 23, 24, 26.1 million, 24, 25, 21.5, probably around 14.3, 14.5, somewhere in there. Might tick up, usually does by the end of the year, but right now that's the projection.
What's that indicative of? Just the ending fund balance?
So the ending fund balance is the beginning fund balance for the next year. So as you're looking at revenues, and I think a few slides in, you'll get the sense of how that impacts the overall budget.
Whatever didn't get spent this year.
Goes into next year's beginning fund balance.
And that's on purpose or?
Yeah, and it's really a snapshot of us spending the fund down, which we know that, we've been doing that. But another word we use quite often is deficit spending. When you see the ending fund and that change, we're getting so much revenue from the state based on this formula and information, which we're projecting that to go down. But that revenue's coming in, and then we have costs. And if our costs are more than our revenue, where's that coming from? That typically comes from ending fund. We spend our ending fund, and ultimately we call that deficit spending. Because there's not enough revenue coming in to cover our costs, we're taking it out of our ending fund. That's another thing that big change there.
So how do you end up with ending fund every year? If you're counting on.
Well, so this is part of the issue that we're presenting, is
Okay.
that as that is declining,
Yeah.
you have less revenue or resources that you can spend. So if your revenues currently do not match your expenditures, and you spent down your ending fund balance, so think of it as I'm just gonna use a personal term, a savings account. You put money in your savings account, you didn't spend as much this month, you put it in your savings account. Then you have a couple large expenses. You pulled all of that out of your savings account, now you have nothing. So the next time, if you have an expense, you won't have anything to rely on. And if you did something like, I'm just gonna say, buy a car on payments. Would you buy a car on payments where you know you're gonna have an ongoing payment on one-time money?
So this is not, just for my simple brain, this is not money that didn't necessarily get spent in the budget. So if we budget, I'm just gonna use fake numbers, 100 million, but we only spent 90 million. It's not that we didn't spend 10 million, it's that at some point in the last so many years, money's been getting tucked away in a savings account.
No, you got it right. It's money, so there's two pieces. One is contingency. So we technically every month, every budget have money set aside, for lack of a better term, or budgeted as that we're not touching it, right? Unless there's a real emergency. So that's rolling every time. Then on top of that, where it comes from typically is it comes from like basically things change, like for example, open positions. So a lot of these bigger, the 23, 24, a lot of those 21, 22, we had a number of positions that we were budgeting for that we couldn't hire for. We couldn't get anyone. So then the end of the year, and this is just one example, we get to the end of the year and we have these positions open in the budget for 100, using round numbers, $100,000, but you didn't spend $100,000 because you never hired that position. So now that money was never spent and it rolls into the ending fund, which becomes part of your beginning fund, which we'll get to in a little bit. So that beginning fund, again, if your revenue's here and your costs here, the beginning funds helped us make that difference up over the last number of years. And what you're noticing there is we spent down significant over the last year. And we did that intentionally. We know we're getting the resources out to kids, we're doing our best, but at some point, what Pat's trying to say, or said very well, is ultimately if you keep spending that down, at some point it's not there. And then your costs are here and your revenue is here, and there's nothing to make up the difference, there's nothing there. At some point in theory, costs and revenue should match, right? And right now ours don't.
Do we have a certain percentage of growth on this money?
Yeah, so this isn't money, so think of it as what's left over at the end of the month,
Mhm.
right? So there isn't necessarily growth on that, it's what's left over at the end. So we usually have a 5% contingency. So that means that's not really a savings account per se, I know people sometimes call it that. If I don't meet my revenue targets, and like my contingency right now is 7 million, if I were $10 million short in revenue, we'd have a problem. Because that's not a savings account and I don't have the funds.
Thank you.
We'll see if the next couple slides will help paint it out a little bit more. Next slide. So we're gonna move to the expenditure side of the house. Our PERS bond is ending, so just for those who are not aware, we got a pension obligation bond way before I came back in 2007-8 timeline. So if you recall in the 2007-8 timeline, that was not the best economic conditions. It was at the moment they went out for the pension bond, and then it turned sideways. So this year we did get a temporary credit on our rates of 1.68% for the biennium. So they always do PERS rates for a biennium. Usually they're based on the prior year. So they're always a little bit behind, there's a lag. We know the rates will increase in the 27-29 biennium. What we don't exactly know yet is how much. We will get new estimates and rates in December. I reached out to PERS because there's several of us in that group that are going to expire. And I reached out to PERS. They are going to try to calculate what the balance is in the side account to help us get an idea of how much that rate is anticipated to increase. So let's look at the next slide. So this is probably better to look at, I think maybe in your packet. So what this is a summary of how much we got when we went out for the PERS bond. And then the rate credits that were applied every year. So these dollars get applied when they're calculating out the rate for the employer. You'll hear of the site account, that's what this is. Typically, your site account rate credits would run at least until the year of your final bond payment. So you'll notice our final bond payment is in 2028. I'm projecting, because I don't have numbers yet from PERS, but based on the prior rate credit experience, I'm projecting we will probably exhaust that in 2027. You can see there that we go from having a balance of 5.3 million to 1.3 million. 1.3 million will not cover much of a rate credit. This is based on a calendar year, not a fiscal year. So we anticipate the 27-29 rate credit to be very minimal. Okay,
So those 2 years, we're looking at 27, you're saying 27 and 28, that these are like huge differences in the impacts to the budget.
right. So what's gonna happen is we're not gonna get much of a rate credit
Mhm.
in the 27 to 29 biennium.
Mhm.
But I still have to make those bond payments,
Right.
so I still have to assess that. So I'm gonna get a rate increase from PERS,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna need to pay the bonds, so that we do through a payroll assessment. So most likely, our rates, if I have to make my best estimate, I would not be surprised if our rates are around 29 to 31%.
Wow.
We currently, I think, are at 25.29 for tier 1, tier 2, and I think it's 22.11 for officer.
And you're saying they're gonna go up that. like-
I think that our tier 1, tier 2 will probably be close to 30%. So does that frame it a little better?
Mhm.
Okay. We are still experiencing high usage on Pay Leave Oregon. The reason that's important is we have to pay into that. There is a set amount that the employee pays, that's statutory. And then the district picks up the additional amount. We do contract out, have a third-party administrator that does that for us. We've been very pleased with their service, but that's the plan. They charge us based on experience, and so the more we use, the higher our rates go.
And we, here's the district pays into that, how,
Right, so the employee pays and then the district pays. And initially, it was supposed to be, I believe, a 0.4 and a 0.6. So 0.4 was the employee, 0.6 was the district. We're currently at 0.79 for the district. So depending on how usage goes this year, we could see another increase.
and help me, because I'm from private sector, is paid, if I go on OPA, in my day job, I pay myself through my PTO, is that? different here, or is this like a weird?
Paid leave Oregon is open to anybody that is employed in Oregon.
Okay,
And so there's a state program, and then there's several third-party administrators that will do the program for you. And so depending on your leave, they handle the leaves. And then under that program, you're allotted so much leave time that you can use. So depending upon whether you're using paid leave Oregon, you're using your sick leave, or you're using both, then those rates can increase.
so but is this high usage means I'm choosing to use paid leave Oregon and not my PTO?
Or they're
Or they're
being made whole. That could also be too.
Okay.
Because paid leave Oregon doesn't pay in full, it's prorated based on your salary.
Okay.
So that also we see a lot is people want to be made whole, and so we're doing calculations weekly on how much. And because there's always a little bit of a lag there on what the program is paying versus what we need to pay. And so, yeah, we pay into that program, and then the employees can utilize it. Something else just to have in the back of your mind, because we did go through some reductions in force this past year. Unemployment, we do anticipate that our reductions around us will increase our rates. So just a reminder, if somebody worked for us, went somewhere else in the last, I think, 18 months, they can affect our rates. So we do anticipate that can go up. So just for some context, average teacher cost for a full-time equivalent is about $120,000. Average instructional assistant about $43,000. So as we get to start talking about reductions, I just wanted to kind of put it in that context, because that's a lot of times what we talk about is how much does it cost in staff. Cost of a day, you can see here by fund type, about $800,000, about $500,000 in the general fund. And this is by year, assuming that there's COLAs and steps. And again, I'm sharing that because often you'll hear about how many days is that when we do a reduction. And so you can kind of get an idea, $500,000, okay, this is how much 3 million would cost. It would be 6 days. You've heard around us, there's folks that did take some furlough days. So that's kind of for the context.
Is that a calendar day or a school day?
So that's based on whatever the calendar is for folks. So depending on different calendars, that number is inclusive of all the different calendars that we have. I think we have about 35 calendars.
Based on this calculation, again, it's the context only, but it would be based on our 192-day contract we have. For example, you could cut days in July. There's people that work in July, but it wouldn't equate to this, right? It'd be totally different. So this amount here would really be closing a full day during the school year. It doesn't necessarily have to be when kids are there. It's when people are scheduled to work, right? So that, I don't know if that answers your question.
I'm trying to think of the right word, in session.
Yeah.
Could be, it's just the contract. We have a number of, we have classified contract individuals, not contract, but individuals that have a working calendar of 9 months. We have 10-month calendars, we have 12-month calendars just in our classified. Teachers in our license group have a 192-day contract. Then they do have some though that work extra days, right? So the end of the year, they have 10 days extra. If you were to cut one of those days, for example, and we aren't proposing cutting anything, just to make sure we're right, but if we were to cut one of those days, it wouldn't equate to this amount, is what I'm saying. It'd have to be a amount to cut that. 192-day profit, for lack of a better term. Yeah, so if we, during the regular school day, tomorrow is the school day, if we close tomorrow, and it was next year, we're estimating it'd be about $800,000 if we closed on the day. Because basically you don't pay salary. Right, not spent. Mhm.
Not spent.
That's exactly right. And the other thing, I'm sure everyone understands this, but it always helps me, is the average teacher cost is loaded. So the average cost, that's loaded benefits, all those types of things, the PERS, all that stuff we're talking about, it's not just salary.
Same for instructional
Mhm.
assistant, yeah, it's all inclusive.
And the last thing I should have said, so first and foremost, no questions, ask them, that's why we're here, and make us re-explain. But if somewhere along the line you just don't get it, you can just write it down, we'll follow up. You can come meet with Pat and I, we can have coffee, we can go deeper and try to, because to tell you the truth, about every other day, I have to go down to Pat and say, explain this to me again. So, please know that no one expects one workshop, oh, I got it, there's gonna be other questions.
And so the other cost impact or expenditure impact is bargaining. We have 3 groups open this year. For next year, we have 3 agreements ending at the end of this fiscal year. Our classified agreement goes through 26-27 for financials. And so that's already set. I tried to do kind of a basic quick and dirty on where would we be at. So we said beginning balance for 26-27 was 14.5 million. My projected revenues are 141.7. If we look at just expenditures this year, and then we added steps for all the groups and health benefits, total expenditures would be at 158. So 156, total resources, 158, total expenditures, already upside down. Contingency, 5%, 7.9. Ending balance, we'd be in the hole, so we would need to do reductions to balance the budget for next year, just to give a step. You can see here, 26-27, adding the step of COLA. Significant increase in the amount we need to reduce, would be about at 14.1. So about 14 million, just over 14 million in reductions to balance the budget.
How about 4%, is that to get the employee groups that are negotiating this year, 4% as well?
That's everybody's stepping a 4%. And so we just did that because we already had one COLA baked in.
Just an estimate,
Yeah.
just to kind of give a picture of what it. And all of the, in my mind, this slide is the slide. All the other slides, context information, we need to know it all and understand why certain costs are going up, some revenues are going down, what is it? But the bottom line right now, again, I unfortunately have to deliver this message. Right now, we are projecting reductions somewhere between, I'm just using round numbers, $10 to $14 million for next year. Right, so that's significant. Now, ending fund balance typically does key up, Pat started with that, so but it doesn't key up this much. Right? So we will be in that conversation about what do reductions look like, how do we navigate those together as a team, right? And the team is the board team, we have representatives from DDA here, we have OSEA here, I mean, there's gonna be conversations we have to have along the way. Yeah.
Why is the, well, let me pause and think my question words. Why are you showing a column for step only and then a column for step in COLA? Is that suggesting the COLA is optional?
No, it is not. We don't know what the COLA is because we have 3 groups that we're bargaining with this spring.
Okay.
So we don't know where that lands. So it's really just showing you a picture of just rolling up costs.
Okay.
When you roll up, you are statutorily obligated to include steps. So we're showing you just to roll up what we're obligated to. This is a cost. So we're just, again, data, that's all it is. Now, on top of that, we have bargaining that we're going through with 3 groups. we made an assumption, the word assumption, we just assumed, we just put in 4% because we know classified are getting 4%, so we just put that in there to give, if we settled on that, pretending, this is just make believe, then this would be the number. Yeah. It's really just data. That's what it is.
So this initial projection also is based on no state school fund reductions. So the picture doesn't get better, assuming that the state does make some sort of reduction. And again, we don't know and won't know until spring. We'll have an initial number from ODE because they're required in the first Monday in March to provide us a projection for the upcoming year. But depending on where the legislature is at in negotiations and decision-making, we may or may not know. So we'll need to do our best at estimating what we think we're gonna get. But we are gonna also be looking at this in the context of our other funds, which we'll get into here in a minute. So any questions so far?
If the reductions were included, would we then, we would see that in total resources row?
So if the
We would have less-
reductions are included, then the expenditures line is gonna decrease
Okay. Thank you.
to get you in balance with how much you're bringing in.
And then the corresponding salary benefit lines as a proportion, right?
So depending on if you negotiate differently or you freeze, so just depends on what you're gonna do and what you're gonna cut, yeah.
Can I ask what, I don't have I don't have a bargaining agreement.
You bet, yeah.
What is the COLA in these prior years? What has it been, the percentage?
It's all over the
Oh,
place.
yeah.
So the last couple agreements have had some significant increases. I think we were at 9 and 3 for
9.3 for
license.
license.
Admin was at 6 and 6. Managers, confidentials were at 6 and 6. They usually follow, admin, and then classified the prior one 13 and 6. So those are pretty significant increases. And so at the time that we did do those, we did say, you know, we are at a point, you remember those fund balances, so folks are like, hey, you have all this money. The problem is again, are you making a car payment on one-time money? So.
The unfortunate part too, it's my responsibility to say this, I don't want to say this because I hope it won't be real. But the reality is a $10 million reduction, which it's gonna be more than that because we aren't even talking about bargaining. A $10 million reduction, we, out of our general fund, right, just using that and all of our funds are over the general fund, 85% of that budget is salaries. So the other 15% really, you can't get this kind of money. There's not that much money there as a leftover 50%. Lights, diesel, fuel, food, you see what I'm saying? So the school districts, a way that they have to balance budget is through what's called reduction in force, which is in the classified, and I know you know about contract, but which is, I'm talking to others as well, but that's part of our process, which is, none of us want to be talking about that. None of us want to be in that position. But right now, that is our worry, and that's something that we'll be tracking. We did have a reduction in force last year that impacted our district, fairly limited compared to this number. But if we were to have to make up this number, we would have to look at how do we reduce salaries, because that's 85% of the budget. Very
The reduction last year was, how much?
The total amount, do you remember the amount, Pat, of reduction last year? I don't remember off the top of my head.
I don't either. I want to say 60, but I think that's too high.
16?
60.
Oh,
Staff.
FTE, you were asking FTE. I thought you were
Well, no, I
asking
was asking either way, money,
number. Okay.
money, yeah.
Yeah, I have to look.
Yeah.
7 something.
Yeah, I think it was in the mid sevens.
That seems right with what the ending fund is too, right? So it's 7 something.
Yeah, it was in the, I think it was in the sevens. In 60, we had a lot more too, as we've been truing up, but we keep getting things tighter and tighter and tighter intentionally, but it also changes the ending fund balance, right? We don't have as many, another thing is the open positions. We have more people applying for the positions we have, so cutting, when you start some sort of reduction, it's often easier to say, hey, we have these open positions. Not always the smartest way to go, because you might need these positions, right? Some positions you just can't cut, but if we couldn't fill them in the last 2 years, maybe we cut those and we save jobs, right, that process. But as we go through the budget development, we cut those down, we have less open positions in our budget. We also know benefits is a place where, trying to budget benefits is a pretty big project, and, ending, how much we leave at the end there can really impact our ending fund balance. Well, we've tightened that up where we're pretty close, and there's just not a lot there. Again, that's not bad, and I think there's labor groups in this room that said, please do that. We want to see that tighter. So I don't speak for them, but I think that's what they're looking for. But the reality, all of that impacts our ending fund where we're at. We're tightening all that up. So there'll be less, if you want to call low-hanging fruit, to find reductions, and more real reductions. If that makes sense.
If, let's say a licensed staff member retires, is their replacement cheaper in cost?
Typically, yes, not always. It depends on, right, it depends on kind of who you hire, but yeah, the way we pay is based on experience. So if we hire someone just out of college and with 1 year experience, the 1 year experience salary versus a 30-year employee, yes, it is less expensive, and there is savings there as well in the process as we move forward, but not always. Again, we have a very difficult position to hire. Can't hire it, there's no one, and we get someone that applies with 27 years. That's amazing. We're hiring them for that position because we don't have any openings. So,
And is any of that reflected in these projections, or is it just assuming the people here today or the people here next year?
Yeah, so that is incorporated in here. So usually what I do when I project things out is I'll project a teacher at bachelor's 1 if I know there's a vacancy. So we rarely hire at bachelor's 1. And then I usually will look at, unless it's like a TOSA type position or something that I know we're gonna hire an experienced person in. But generally, in my general teaching tool, I'll do a bachelor's 1 and I'll do 6 months of PERS rather than 12 months of PERS. So those are ways that we look at, how do we factor in the attrition for folks. Same with like some of our classified. I may do a B and I may do it at 8 months because there's attrition. And we're seeing higher rates of attrition. So it kind of just depends. We look at what's happening in the market. What do we think that's gonna happen? So like if everybody, we're hearing Portland's at 50 million for next year. We're hearing Salem's at 25. I haven't heard numbers really around here yet. We know Reynolds did reductions. So as we're looking into next year, if there's that many people available, am I going to be hiring at a bachelor's, or am I probably gonna budget a little higher because I might get more experienced folks? So those things are, we try to take into consideration. And there's been a varying amount of people that retire or resign. So like in our licensed a couple years ago, 1 year it was like 30 and the next year it was nearly 80. So that's quite a swing to try and plan for.
So I don't think you've answered it yet, but do you have an idea of who might be retiring at the end of this school year, and is that projected here?
So for folks that we know that have submitted, yes. Or if there's something that's currently vacant, yes. But, folks in this room that have more than 30 years of experience.
Yeah,
And I don't know that they're gonna retire anytime soon.
I'm hoping you're not hearing this as a nitpick, I'm just
No.
trying to set, I'm
So
just trying to
that's the
imagine what-
thing, is we try to
trying
look
to get
at
it in
that.
your head.
And so, like, when I prepared for reductions for this year for my license, that's what I cut, is I looked at anybody and I need this many cuts. I went through the different programs and I looked at who are my most senior that most likely will go, and that's where I reduced. So,
Does the district have a notification period for retirement? Could I just, if June comes and I say, see, I'm not coming back next year, I'm retired, is that?
Technically, yes. When there is language, like to qualify for the early retirement benefit, which is in there, there's certain notifications. But technically, when someone meets the PERS requirements, they meet the PERS requirements. Now, there's a 60-day through TSPC that any licensed person is required to give. And if they don't, then you could report to TSPC and there could be discipline on license. But if someone's retiring, they might not care necessarily, they could walk in, drop their keys off and say, tomorrow's July 1 or tomorrow's May 1, and I'm done, because my PERS is, so. Does that make sense? They still get their PERS, so.
I'm just trying to, like I said, trying to get in Pat's head of like how much
Yeah.
of this projection includes.
And to be clear, I'm using an example, but typically people who are retiring are definitely communicating with us, planning, letting us know. There are some that do go mid-year, there are some that go at that time, but they, don't do that. They're usually communicating and sharing with us. And like I said, we have a number, not a large number in HR of employees that have communicated with us that are retiring.
Already.
We know we'll get more, but there are some, yeah.
and, you generally want to give notice because they do have to do a lot of confirmations on, your hours and different things. And it can take 3 months to get your first payment. So you do wanna plan ahead a bit. So does this kind of explain that ending balance? So obviously we can't go into a negative situation here, or we can't at least budget for a negative situation. So what we have to do is bring that back in line by reducing the expenditures. There's really not anything I can do revenue-wise. And that's the difference between us and like cities. I loved my old boss. He left because he said, I get so depressed because I can't raise any money. I can't do anything to solve our revenue issues. So he went to see Portland years ago. And he's like, I can charge a fee. I can do a permit. I can do this or that. And it's just statutorily different. So there's not a lot we can do in education other than look for grants or grant opportunities, but there aren't a lot of things that we can do to generate revenue. Any other questions here?
I do. Pat, I remember during last year or whatever it was, you were talking about part of the issue with the Indian fund balance needing to be so much, should be best practices 2 months of operating. What is the?
I think it's 3 months of operating costs. And so that's probably around 20.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that impacts the rates that you're able to secure on things like bonds.
So, right, so we actually got a flag last year. So when we sell bonds, we get rated by Standard & Poor's. And we kept our rating, which I think is AA minus, the last time, but they did put us on watch, because of our enrollment decline. And so one of the things that they were impressed with is that we were able to either keep or increase that ending fund balance during a significant enrollment decline. So you can look at that other page and go, yeah, there's quite a bit of revenue stream that, no students, no revenue. And so they did actually reach out to me and said, hey, I'm noticing this year that you're spending down your balance. And I said, yeah, we just don't have the revenue. So they could put us on notice that they're changing our bond rating. So just, that means that as they go through the bond market and do resell, there's differing, amounts, and it's gonna be maybe less palatable for some of the folks that are buying them on resale, so. And then that will also look to your next bond, because then you might get downgraded. And we've seen that with mostly cities, I think, recently. But, yeah. Any other questions? So student investment account, we're gonna move over to grants, and we'll start with some state grants. We won't go through every grant that we have. I'm not going through early childhood tonight, simply because we did bring that last time to the board meeting last week. There's an increase at this time. We didn't go delve into that particular grant. State grant, student investment account 24-25, $9.5 million. Our adopted budget was 10.5. We anticipated an increase. We got 9.5 for this year, so we did some reductions. I could have done but yeah, so we did do that primarily through IAs. Anticipated budget for next fiscal year, 9.9. We anticipate at least 200,000 in reductions are needed to balance for next year. That simply is not enough revenue for us. Just a reminder, they had some corporate activity tax reductions in their recommendations. So this could affect this even more, and we may need to reduce whatever's in here more. So we did end up doing a little swapping. Our special ed IAs that were in SIA are now in general fund. So that was intentional, because we do have to meet a maintenance of effort requirement wherever they're funded, so. And that was part of our reductions. Any questions there? Measure 98, last year we had 3 million, this year 2.7. That's what we had in our adopted budget. Anticipated budget for 26-27 is about 2.8. This time, there aren't as many staff in here, so there are programmatic things we could reduce. Not that we want to, but if we needed to balance, we could. There are several reductions in ODE's proposals for CTE programs, including this. So I do anticipate there will be some sort of additional reduction to this grant, so. Grow your own programs, about 0.4 million last year, 0.3 this year. That's what we adopted. That's what was in our revised budget, so no change. Anticipated budget for 26-27. So they've given us a grant allocation for next year. I will tell you, this is a program that they are slated to eliminate in their proposal. I would not be surprised if this does end up going away. So everything in their educator advancement, they've basically said everything here is slated for the first 2.5% reduction.
I thought that was a win. And they were just letting people in it finish it out.
Yeah, they found funding for it. And so we did get our allocation, and our allocation was for both fiscal years.
Okay.
So that's where, at the time, it was slated to be eliminated. They were hoping that through the legislative process, they'd be able to revive it. But again, as they rolled out their reduction scenarios, this was on elimination for 26-27. So that would be a year earlier than anticipated.
So that would not let those in and finish it out with the current funding? Is that
Correct,
right?
and so we do have one staff member in that particular grant. So we would need to determine, do we continue that program with general fund and carve out even more? Do we keep the individual position? So it's just, a lot of things that are gonna be decision-making as we go through the budget process. Early literacy grant, about $692,000 last year. When we adopted the budget, we did at 1.4 million. So as a reminder, at the end of last year, there were a couple hot items that we thought, that the governor was pushing. That was this, and it basically doubling the grant, as well as, high-cost disability. Neither of those occurred. So we had to do a little fancy footwork with what was planned. Revised budget about 680,000, anticipated budget, for the following year is 708. No anticipated reductions, for this particular grant from what we, ended up revising for this year. Title I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of the volatility here. So you can see 23-24, about 3.9, 24-25, about 4 million, 25-26, got a bump, yay. 26-27, that should actually read 120,000 at least, for a reduction, to stay in balance. Now, what we're concerned about at the federal level is they want to change, there's discussion about changing how this is, allocated out. There's discussion about other title programs going away. So, and the amount of funding significantly decreased. So I would not be surprised if this 120,000 grows quite a bit, just for the simple fact that it is so volatile at the federal level. So
When you say quite a bit, do you mean?
I would not be
Hundreds of
surprised,
thousands.
$500,000 or more. And then Brooke made a face, sorry.
You should make it.
Elise probably made a face too back there. She just kind of, oh.
It sucks.
So you're kind of getting the sense, we're seeing things contract from all different angles, which are really gonna affect how we decide to build the budget for next year, what we cover, what we can't, and then just the simple impacts from the state. Title II, 245,492 this year, anticipate 470 for 26-27. That's a projection. We think, we won't have an issue with this unless the federal allocation is reduced or eliminated. This has been, a discussion for the chopping block at the federal level. Teacher professional development doesn't seem to be, their priority. So I would not be surprised if it gets reduced or eliminated. Again, we have some staffing in there, but a lot of it is PD related. So we would need to decide what we're going to do there. Title III remained pretty similar, 24, 25, 25, 26. Again, not sure on 26, 27. This one has been discussed, specifically about elimination. Of course, anything that you're dealing with immigrant or migrant students, seems to be a target at the federal level. What we anticipate is probably at least a $32,000 reduction to that program budget, should they fund it. But I would not be surprised if they come back and say no. We do fund our liaisons as well as Atosa. And so that would be positions we need to either absorb or decide what we're going to do. Title IV, 317, down a tick for this year to 292,000. Unknown amount for 26, 27. We anticipate we need to reduce if we still get a grant and it remains at that level. Again, unclear whether it's going to be continued or not under the federal program, federal administration. Our Individuals with Disabilities Education Act grant, so 24, 25 grant, 1.5, 25, 26 grant. So this is still a preliminary allocation of 1.4 million. 26, 27, don't know. We have our special ed child count that comes in December. That'll give us a better idea of how many students are out there. And they use that for funding. We currently are projecting a deficit this year of about 80,000 at this time. So we anticipate our numbers went up, I believe, last year a tick. And so we do anticipate some more funding. That really is dependent on numbers statewide and federal government. We don't anticipate this going away, but again, some question on will they fund it. This particular grant at the federal level has never been funded at full funding, which I think is 40%. So we're not sure what's going to happen with this one. Just about on time. Any other questions?
Title III versus IDEA.
Mhm.
Can you just define the differences?
Title III.
Title III is like usually your English,
English language learners.
learners, yeah,
Okay.
so.
IDEA is students with disabilities.
Title IV is college.
Title IV is, this big bucket called, because there's 4 different buckets of how you can spend the money.
Yeah,
What's the name of it?
it's SS8E, but it's basically well-rounded learning, safe and healthy schools, and technology.
And then
So
Title
that's
I.
been going into Title I.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot that.
Yeah, that's a
No,
lot to
nothing
remember.
follows what you got.
Since I have time on page 19. In the adopted budget for this year was an assumption that there was going to be money allocated and it didn't happen.
Right.
I'm trying to ask this in a recognizing that there's probably going to be cuts is the projection, and once again, I'm just going to get in your head, is projection having more of that kind of stuff where there's an assumption that more money might be there than there is now, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure I understand.
So in 24, 25, the budget was 700,000.
Right.
And then the thinking with last year's budget was there's maybe some legislative action that might double
Right.
that. And it didn't happen, but you budgeted as if it was gonna happen.
Right.
Is there any of that in your projections to just be mindful of?
So, well, the legislature isn't in session, so when the legislature gets into session, is when we'll make those decisions. I would probably be more conservative and rather come back and bring you a budget amendment if there's more money. In this case, there was a lot of discussion, so like in the general fund, we bumped up high cost disability. There was a lot of discussion and a lot of support for early literacy. That was kind of the governor's pet project. And so it seemed like up until after we did the proposed budget, that those things were gonna go through. And then all of a sudden, boom, they fell through. So, no, I'll probably take a more conservative estimate. But again, my numbers are based on what I know today. So as soon as they start making decisions, we can start fleshing things out more.
So we have time, so there's more questions. I just want to share a couple things. First, as we started, I didn't say it, but I normally do say it, so I'm going to say it now in case we do wrap up in the next few minutes because people need to process. Very heavy conversation, very heavy and real situation that I will say the state of Oregon is in, but right now we're talking David Douglas, our budget, our revenue, and what we do, there's a gap. And the reality is I would argue that the services we're getting out to kids right now aren't enough, right? And what we're talking about is reductions. We need more, not less. But it is where we're at today. The second thing I want to make sure everyone understands that in our style, we aren't doing this workshop. And again, this is hard because I know it will, but the intent is not to raise anxiety. The intent is not to cause fear. The intent is to be transparent where we're at so there's not surprises, right? And I'm very hopeful. We did this December last year and the number was better by the end than it was when we did this in December last year. I would be unprofessional to say, don't worry, this is going to go down a lot. I think there's a lot more of the perfect storm. There's a lot more coming at us this time than last year, unfortunately. But that doesn't eliminate hope, and that doesn't eliminate that no matter what, the numbers will change. Some of them may get worse, quite possibly get worse, and some of them may or quite possibly get a little better. But right now, projection-wise, we know there's a need for reduction for us to get a balanced budget in the spring. We haven't even talked about that reduction yet with our admin, with our labor groups. We haven't started that conversation yet. This is the launch. I will say kind of the same thing, these broad numbers, knowing where we're at. When we meet with administrators, we can keep them up to speed, not with the numbers and the decimal points, more where our ending fund, revenue, kind of that big picture. Just looking at the ending fund balance change, there's a deficit there, right? And that's all you have to look at. So again, the intent is not to cause fear, the intent is to be transparent. And then finally, this is hard, I will say, to talk about because we're talking about kids, we're talking about needs for kids, we're talking about support. So I wanted the board to hear that there's no one, I believe, in this district that takes these conversations lightly or assumes anything. Like I said, I wish we were talking about, we need to act. There are needs, our kids, there are needs that we're not meeting today because of the budget. And we're talking about going the other way. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure I shared that before if we do wrap up for some reason earlier than we thought. Also follow up, I said it earlier, but please know, board members, if there's any kind of follow up, any kind of questions, any kind of let's meet, let's talk, we can make that happen. We can do it over the phone, we can Zoom, or questions. Pat's amazing, we just answer questions in emails. If you have some things you just want to clarify that kind of go off.
At the state level, with these proposed eliminations, do they just go away forever, or is it like they're unfunded and then they sit there and theoretically get refunded down the road?
Yeah, so we don't know how they roll it out, if they actually pull that and say, okay, this is going. There would probably be something around, I would guess that the intention would be adding back at some point when budgets change, how long that is, whether there's language that he's at, that the ending funds balance up, so this is how we add that. I don't know that they'll go into that much detail, as much as these are just gone. I would say, just my understanding that the individuals would be under the theory that if things come back and get better, these are things that are coming back, but I really can't answer that right now because they haven't told us.
So for the last cycle, we had a meeting where we went through different scenarios and where we have to cut and what we have to do specifically. When the timeline does it happen? for this?
Yeah, I think, we haven't talked about it as a leadership team and then ultimately the whole board and then the cabinet. I think probably we'll be starting in July, giving you, I mean, not July.
You said you weren't here to spike our anxiety.
Yeah, exactly. The other J, I think January, we're gonna have to, we talked about it a little bit, thinking about, okay, if it's 10 million, if it's 15 million, or what is it? We just don't know with the state yet, if that 15 is our starting, then going down by 2 million increments, $1 million increments, where we're at. So I think it starts with that. What do we think is realistic increments, right? So I'll just use numbers. If last year we used 10 million, 8 million, 6 million, making that up. This year, 15 million, 13 million, whatever we decide it is, we will figure that out. And then we start looking at, okay, what do we actually look at and have those conversations? I will say this, I think, personally, I think this is a steeper because we've done some of those reductions I've already talked about. One, and two is we did reductions over the last, literally the last 6 years. We've done reductions every year through attrition because of enrollment. We have done, but this year I think there's less to get out of that function. I think it'll be more real. Yeah. Someone was raising their hand and I kept talking.
If anyone else has questions. Okay. Good, I will. I've been noodling on this for a little while. So there's tax bucks. That the district gets.
Yep.
And then there's state bucks,
Yep.
federal bucks.
That's correct.
Are there any other dollars that aren't from the government?
Just grants. Just grants.
Yeah, there's,
And then,
In
so then
small
that,
quantities, yeah.
but, so then with that, is there money out there that the district could get if they had FTE or resources to do it, or is there just, there's just nothing to even try to do?
Not really. We have a grant writer.
Okay.
yeah. What you're getting at a little bit, I think, if we had 5 grant writers, could they make their salary back plus as much?
Yeah.
I don't know that there's that many grants out there, there's that much. The reality is this contraction that Pat's talking about across the state, I mean, really it's kind of across the nation. So we're not only talking about ourselves and our own staff and our people and our family and our community, but we're also talking about our partnerships with CDOs and what they're going through and lots of money. So their grants are shrinking and the access that they have. The county's conversation, you've probably been following in the news or seen snippets, they're looking at, some schools that we rely heavily on, how well they might be impacted. So there's a lot. Now our grant writer is amazing and without her, I don't know what we do, but I don't think it would equate to make up the difference. There'd probably benefit, right? To say, hey, wow, if we had another grant writer, could we get more? We would get more. I just don't know if it offset, yeah, we added a grant writer while we're cutting more. I mean, it's, yeah.
And then if the district went to Target and said, hey, would you like to give us $10 million in a fantasy win? Is that an option?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if someone wanted to donate money, there's ways to do that. We have a foundation, yeah, I mean, in theory.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, since I'm new to this, how much of a restriction on dollars the district has on requirement, other than maybe.
I think some tax code, right? Yeah.
Has there been, since we're kind of in like a new land of budget reductions, and this shows my naivete, is there like any precedence for like an emergency tax bond, like tax?
For the district?
Yeah.
To
for the
take, to
district
do like an
receive-
operation levy or something?
Yeah.
I don't know if we
Like
could do
how
an
long is that?
emergency one, we could go through a regular planning, I don't know, I'm looking at that to make sure, because I don't know of emergency process, but we could go through the regular cycle and look at what it is and look at a levy, an optional levy.
That hard to pass.
Yeah,
Especially now.
They're hard to pass.
Yeah.
They're the first to get compressed.
sorry.
They're the first to get compressed.
Um,
And so there's limits in education and general government and they look at all of the governmental entities that fit into those categories. And if the valuations and those rates are maxed, the first thing that they reduce is local option levies. And so a few years ago, you might recall Portland lost a lot because they weren't able to assess their total levy. And so that's one of the things you have to think about is if you don't get those funds, what are you going to do? So they're also, as you noticed, or you might not recall, there's a match program at the state for local options. That's on the cut proposal. So
And again, I'm just framing it in my head, 2 tiers. 1 tier is just reductions based on our revenue, based on our enrollment, based on PERS increases. We know there's reductions. The second level is this Wednesday's revenue projection. There are possible answers to that, right? For example, we talked about this a little bit. Our legislature could decouple from the federal tax, right, to change the impacts on HR 1. We know there's an education stability fund that we could access if those deeper cuts come, and we have cuts tier 1, and I'll call it tier 2. There are other avenues to support that, and
that's what you were talking about.
yes.
Which is why last time we had like scenario 1, scenario 2, because we'll have to do that again because you don't know what's gonna happen.
and they've not, I don't think, figured out what the trigger is to access the stability fund.
Yeah, I don't think there's the education stability fund, I don't think there's a monetary fund. I think it's a vote, but I could be wrong on that. I think it comes down to a vote in the certain amount, maybe 3/4 or majority. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah.
And this is from Oklahoma.
No, I think the rainy day fund has a trigger.
Yes.
That one has like a 2% and like 1%.
That's correct. Yep.
And this is what ODE is recommending.
This is their exercise that they went through. LFO required them to go through. If we cut 5% per division in 2.5 increments, this is what we will be cutting.
Yep. So that was the presentation that they gave to superintendents and business managers about a week ago. I think that they gave their information to the legislative office on the 3rd. We were supposed to have a meeting, I think that's right, because we were supposed to have a meeting with them a week ago Wednesday, and they canceled it last minute, and we ended up rescheduling it for last Monday. So I think it was yours on Monday too, or so.
We were right before you. So yeah, we'll learn more about that Wednesday.
Hold harmless, can you remind me what that means? Just like no impact to the budget? Or-
So those are things that they did not suggest or recommend for reduction. And remember, there's another economic forecast this Wednesday. I wouldn't be surprised if it's less favorable than even the last one. And so we'll see how things go. And just a reminder that ending fund balance, one of the contributors to that also was we had a lot of federal stimulus money coming in. So we did make some pretty calculated movements and getting some of our staff out to pay for or to increase that ending fund balance. So we knew, because we knew that federal money was coming to an end and there would be a cliff. So we were trying to hold on as long as we could. So that's kind of part of it too. Perplexing.
Are there any, I know that each state is in a unique situation, but are there any coalitions in these reduction exercises that you feel have been supportive and helpful in guiding, or?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but there's.
Just like,
Go ahead.
kind of like, I know ODA is kind of like our North Star in helping us guide through this, but, I guess nationally, I assume other school systems are going through the same processes, and like, if there's any, I don't know, it's hard to say best practices, but like, when you're reducing staff, but.
I don't know, there's definitely guidance that's provided, from OSBA to ODE. Unfortunately, we've been through it, a couple different times, kind of at a deeper level. So we definitely have processes we follow as well. It's guided by statute, it's a law, and then our contract, which are kind of one of the policies. So the law, policy, and our contract all have language that guide us. So I mean, those are all non-negotiable. The one thing I can say, and I believe this with my heart, is we don't know the numbers yet. We don't know exactly how this will play out. What I do know is we are committed as a district, and I believe everyone at this table is committed to treat people right in the process. We've always put that at the forefront of this. You know, I mean, it services the kids, it's jobs, it's livelihood, it's all of that. It's impacts to the education system as a whole, right? I mean, when you reduce, like, where the state might be going to build that back up as a state in education, we're just getting out of the 9-10, right? I mean, so that's just real. So, yeah, again, I don't want to use the word straightforward because it's a lot more than that, but it, you know, again, there's law, there's policy, and there's contractual language. This is how we do it. This is the process. And from there, the priority for me is we stay on the right side of that because there's only one side. And then two is we treat people right along the way, provide resources, provide information. You know, going through the entire, being very transparent with our communication, what's coming, when it's coming, how we do it, all of these types of things.
Is there any precedent working with any of our neighboring school districts to share costs of certain things? Because there are things that we probably spend X dollars on and they spend X dollars on. If we did it together, it would be not as much as we're spending separately. I know that's a much more difficult thing to do, but considering we have numerous small districts around us going through similar things, is that even a thing we could explore? I don't know how that would work. I'm trying to think.
I love the thinking. I don't know how it would work either,
Yeah.
but, you know, the answer, the piece of that is our MESD. That's kind of part of their function, and what they do is we leverage resources together. They provide certain services for us around that. You could build that up a little bit, or the creative side that you're talking about is trying to think of programming and asking the questions. You know, what if we leverage resources together? It's kind of hard because the day-to-day services are today and tomorrow is in another district in our district. So how, they're like PD, we do a better job of leveraging and using the ESD space and bringing in other districts. And so there are definitely things we can look at.
Especially since our geographically, like Park Rose, and we're not very big, like, you know,
Right.
so sharing something.
Yeah.
Be like, we'll take these types of classes, you take those, and then, you know, then you can share, right? I probably much more difficult than,
Yes.
yeah.
But it's a good thought. And the reality is, you know, short term, we're talking tonight, this year, next couple of years. Long term, who knows, you know, how education actually changes, right? What changes will education go through? We have these funding, I'm gonna use the word crisis, you know, who knows how things might look and change and shift. And there have been, no one's talking about this. No one's saying anything about this. But in the past, there have been conversations about, well, what if districts merged? What if districts come together, right? We have multiple number of districts together here. What if they came together?
And if I know what some school board members might have talked about it.
Well, that's fine. That's, yeah, I don't know about those
Just-
conversations. But yeah,
Just because everyone is everyone's kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what
Yeah.
actually might work.
fair.
And like with Park Rose, it's easy to talk to them because they're very similar, right? And even ideologically, the board is very similar.
Yeah.
So we have similar values and no one wants to cut students who are like finding, kind of think programs for students, so finding ways to do that. Right?
Totally understand. When I say everyone, I shouldn't speak for everyone. What I mean is I can tell you I have not, and I know Pat has not been in any official or unofficial conversations about that at
They're
all.
definitely not.
But it has come up. It has come up in our area and region before.
Yeah.
Years ago, I think before Ken and I, there was a discussion about merging with Park Rose, wasn't there?
Yeah,
It didn't come
it's
into
awesome.
fruition, but.
Yeah.
It's like,
If we have a bit more time. Have we covered, sorry, Sharon, have we covered all the agenda items?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh.
Right, I'm gonna keep asking questions. Of the 100% of the budget, 15% is not people, is what I heard.
85% is personnel.
So 15% is not people, and how wiggly is that 15%? And when I say wiggly, I mean things like you're paying for internet service and calling.
Electricity.
Well, I know electricity, there's no wiggle for electricity.
Yeah, there's
That's
a wiggle
wiggle
for-
You're
for,
trying to figure out what's fixed costs versus what can we really
What-
talk about.
yeah, what could, like, internet costs, you could go back to Allstream or Lumen or whoever and say, hey, can we do something different? Because that's what I've done in my day job. I know electricity is what it is, and PGE's gonna not give you a reduced rate, as far as I understand.
Do you have an idea percentage of that is fixed cost versus?
not off the top of my head now.
Or it's still on the internet thing, like you're paying for like a fast service to Earl Boyles, and but you really only need a medium service, that kind of stuff. Is there someone looking at that kind of stuff?
All our internet goes through MESD pretty much,
Okay,
and so we're on the ring, and so,
okay.
yeah, so that'll,
So that's
all of that
fixed.
comes through, so that's kind of baked in. Those, fees, for the most part, come through, resolution dollars through MESD. The only ones that we've paid for usually are related to our rental locations, like MECP. We're in the process of getting, one office up there added in. So, but like when we have the division office, that we pay for a Comcast service.
Okay.
I'm sure that's all we
Yeah.
have tonight. I don't know if there's more, definitely we can.
Do you have any more questions?
Always.
Anyone else who hasn't also have answered? Anything? Darla? You already know the answer, so.
Can I end with
I
one
don't want
last statement?
slower internet. When I need to look a kid up and there's an emergency and they're spinning, no.
The last thing I'd want to say is, again, heavy topic, talked a lot about it. I just want to reflect on and make sure everyone hears the amazing work that we're seeing and it's happening every day in our schools. And I never want to lose track of that. And just for us to, when adults were in this room talking about these things, sometimes we're farther and farther away from schools. The reality, there's challenges every day. I think we all know that, but there's also so many success stories because of our people. You know, all of our employees, I think, are here and are amazing and showing up every day. So I just want to keep us grounded in that every time we meet, especially after a heavy meeting like this. When we get into buildings and see the work, I mean, that's definitely what it's about. So just want to thank our teams.
All right, well, unless there's anything else we can adjourn for this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank Pat.
Thank you.
Muriel, there's a DEF meeting tomorrow, I'm gonna send you, it's a